Tom, can you hear okay? Yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh yeah, Tom, you're muted.
How about now?
How
Yes.
about, yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Um,
Hi, Lyndon.
Lyndon, are you going to be able to participate? Like, can you turn your camera on?
Okay, maybe we start at like 12:04.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, Lyndon, part of this is participatory. So, can you just make it a point to type your answers in the chat so that Delaney has them, please?
Yeah, if you just need to,
Great. Thank you.
and Lyndon, yes. Awesome.
That's
Sounds
great. Thank you. So, Tom, where are you calling in from?
From outside of Pittsburgh,
Ah,
Mount Lebanon, a little suburban place.
so we got snow this morning. Just curious if other people did.
Oh, no. No, it got colder definitely from what it has been, but no snow.
Uh-huh. Coming to a city near you.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi,
Leticia.
Leticia.
Hi, hi everyone.
No.
Yeah, we have a few more people showing up.
Okay, that's good. So I can, oh, here's Michelle. Hello, Michelle Hughes. And hey, Michelle. Ah, okay. So Lyndon, there, there are some juicy questions to offer. If at any point you want to pipe in, feel free to do so, especially if you have questions. Great.
All right. I think it's good to get
Go ahead
started.
and start.
Thank you all for coming. Really excited to have some time to reflect and set goals and, think about all the work we've done and all the work that we're going to continue to do and how to do that. So thank you for joining. I'm really excited to have Dr. Claire Bamberg with us again. So take it away.
Okay. So when Delaney asked if I would give this some thought, I reflected both back into my experience in the parish and my work as a professional coach, certified coach. And what I find is there are two elements to keep in mind around reflection. One is to allow time, like really allow time. So what I'm going to do is walk through with you questions that you can ask on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, um, and an annual basis that will help you recalibrate and kind of get a feel for where you are, you and your teams. Um, there's power, most powerful questions are deceptively brief, very careful in their choice of language, and followed by allowing enough space for people to really think their thoughts through. Um, you hit it. You always reflect back what you've heard, and you really heard somebody when you get a yes and, right? So if you get a well or not quite or but you've missed something. So go back and try again because a lot of what makes this time of reflection powerful has to do with the other feeling listened to, engaged, valued for their input, that kind of thing. So again, if you get yes and, don't worry about the yes, you got it. They now feel heard enough to be able to add additional information. So there's some context around powerful questions. Any questions from you about that? Okay. So Delaney sent some questions out in the newsletter for you to consider. I don't know how many of you actually saw those. Those are adapted from and edited around some questions that I use when I'm closing a coach training program, an intensive week or an immersive week. I can read them, Michelle, if you don't have them open. I'll do them for people. Let me go through the questions themselves one time. And then what we'll do is take them one at a time. And then I'll tell you how I would use questions in general. And then we can have a open Q&A. So the first question is, what new insights? So here's a use of tool of a special word. What new insights and or tools might you have gained during the S4 program? You can just take a moment and think about that. And I'll go on to the next, where you can just jot a few things down so you don't forget them. I'll go on to the next question. Hey, Bridget.
Hello.
Just going through some questions. Next question, second question is, what others would you like to develop in the next year? Let me tease that out just a little bit. What things have you heard? What programs have you been engaged? What topics? If you look back over the list of topics that you've had this year, which are the ones that you go yourself, you have a response, yes, and I'd like to know more about. Last time, several of you asked about the communications and conflict webinars. Yeah, I can repeat the first question. The first question was, what new insights, so emphasis on new, what new insights and or tools might you have gained during the S4 program? So just jot a couple down so you don't forget. The second is, what others would you like to develop in the next year? And I gave you some context for that question. The third is, and this is important for you to give yourself some time to feel and think your way through, what new insight was most surprising to you in this last year and why? And finally, what work or project are you most proud of during this past year? And what I'd like you to do is just a little star next to that one. Are you putting them all down, Delaney?
Yeah, I added them to the chat for people's reference.
Great. Okay. So those are for reference. Don't let them distract you. So again, just for the people who are just coming on, there is, when I have supported churches in growth, and I don't just mean growth in numbers, although that's also happened. It's happened because there's been an increased depth of interaction and thought on the part of the parishioners. Your program people are also going to benefit from this same thing. And what I'd like to do is highlight for you some questions that you can ask weekly, monthly, quarterly, really important, and annually, that will help you stay fresh, alert, focused on the project that you have at hand, and keep the folks that you're working with engaged. Good? You with me so far? All right. So understand that when you enter into work that around powerful questions with people, that takes a certain level of vulnerability on their part to answer honestly, and you want to create a space where that's possible because you can't work with what you don't know about. Um, and it means being honest and in touch with yourself as you begin to consider these things, and a certain willingness on your part to model self-reflective, non-anxious, non-judgmental approach to evaluation and being present to one another. Fair enough? Okay. Um, so let's go through the first one and get some feel for rhythm. It is really helpful if people will turn their cameras on because a lot of engagement is based on kind of visuals, and you're going to want that from your folks as well, just so there's that kind of interaction and touch base. So I'm just going to go around the screen, my screen. The name of the person who is Covenant United Church of Christ. What would be a first name there? Or I can just say Covenant, I guess.
In just a moment.
I have to leave in 20 minutes. Okay, Letitia, let's start with you then for a moment. And the recording will be available, right? So I'll just do the bigger view for a moment, and then we'll come back to the weekly ones. The biggest thing that I find, particularly in new initiatives or churches that are committed to doing something different, is they take what we call mental health professionals call a leap for health, and suddenly they're going to do everything at once, which sets them up for not doing some of those things and feeling badly, or trying to do all those things and not doing any of them well. So one of the biggest aids and supports I was able to give to a church I was seeing through this kind of transition was to ask the question fairly regularly. So it can be seasonal, it can be quarterly as a matter of quarterly, and it's always annual. What new thing are you interested and committed to doing in this coming year or time? And this is the hard one for them. And what thing are you going to put down in order to do that well? And I really did insist that they answer. And the final thing that I would ask that bumfuzzled them completely in the beginning when I started to ask it is, and with whom around this table will you work to achieve success? Or with whom on the screen? Because we have people who are really engaged in success, they often think in silos and turf. And helping them to understand that really honestly, when we're engaged in this work, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts it's made of. And collaboration and thought partners really strengthen an initiative. So those three questions: what new thing are you committed to doing? Because they always talk about new things. And it's only one new thing. What one new thing are you committed to doing in this coming year? Ancillary questions to that: how are you going to measure success? What resources do you need? And what is your first next step? And be careful, this is where they're likely to say, I'm going to build the Eiffel Tower in a moment. You may have to insert, what is your first simplest next step? Right? So what is your one new thing you're going to pick up? And that's both quarterly and annually. What is the thing you're going to put down or delegate, get out of your group in order to do that well, that first thing well? And again, I would really push them in that. Who's going to do it? What's your first next step? By when will you take that initiative? Really ask those questions. And then the final question is built into those others. With whom will you work to accomplish this? And believe it or not, that question is an evangelism tool with a small e, because as people begin to think about who they could include and ask to participate, those people become engaged and involved, and you're growing your leadership. And if you can help people to think kind of outside the box, you're growing your membership. Like, who in their community do they know that might be interested in this? A typical coaching question is, who's not at this table that this decision will impact? Let's get that population represented. Right? So who is not at this table or who is not engaged in this conversation right now that this decision will impact or this program will impact? How many times have you watched an initiative get created by people who aren't going to live it? So they think they've solved all the problems, but the people who are actually living it are like, there was a basic missed here, us, right? So, so being really, really conscious of that. Letitia, because you do have to go, I'm wondering if you have any questions for me on those.
Not really.
Okay.
I need to
Okay.
check with my team because I might think something, but I think
That's
the
fine.
richness comes from the conversation
That's really
with
fine.
church members. Mhm.
That's really fine. Delaney will know how to reach me if there's anything she can't answer herself.
Thank you.
What I would say on a monthly basis is that you revisit some of the smaller term questions. How are we doing? How are you doing? What do you need from me in order to feel better equipped, more resourced? Who else can we partner with? Consistently thinking outside of self, because where groups and teams get overwhelmed is when they feel isolated and like it's all up to them. And that simple question, who else, really helps people kind of lift their head up and get the burden off their back.
Mhm.
On a weekly basis, those of you who are in leadership, a really powerful, powerful initiative that you can engage in is to take some time and think about all the leaders that you're working with on your project or program. And who have you not heard from that week, or who are you aware might have some things going on? And to do that personal outreach, it may only take 10 or 15 minutes. But what it's going to yield is, again, you're not in this alone. I care. And there's believe it or well, you felt it yourselves probably. There's an energy infusion that comes with knowing you've been seen, right? You've been seen and you've been appreciated. So on a weekly basis, you who are in leadership, take some time, really think about the people. And I would encourage you to be in touch with every member of your team no less than once a month, right? No less than once a month, reviewing, asking, how are you doing? How am I doing supporting you? What resources might you need? Who can we enlist to help us in the work that we're about? So Letitia, that I wanted to be sure to give you those. That's kind of an overview. We're going to go over, thank you for your work. We're going to go over the other three questions. It'll be recorded, right? So and can you report in on the first one? What new insights and tools might you have gained during the S4 time?
I think we deepen our understanding of the importance of building meaningful relationships, authentic relationships in the community. And we are seeing the fruits of that. So for us, we were all about the relationship, learning to build with patience, with constancy, many relationships that we didn't have before.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. if you could let Delaney know what resources have been most helpful to you in doing that, I think that would be, I'm guessing, would be really helpful, Delaney, to have that, to know that from people.
Yes, I feel
Okay.
that coaching structure, like having that coach and the meetings with that of the team with the coach was something that kept us motivated
Yeah.
and energized. Well, we were motivated, but just hearing words of affirmation of, yeah, we felt very
Yeah.
supported, very supported. Mhm.
That's wonderful. So the coach did for you what I'm encouraging you to do for your team that you're working with on a monthly basis. It's that kind of touch base. I'm here. I see you. I appreciate your work.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Wonderful. Um, how about other people? Tom, what new insight or tool might you have gained?
Yeah, I think it's the one I identified when our group met in person here in Pittsburgh just last week, the asset mapping tool,
Mm,
and
hmm
in particular, the question uh, being encouraged to see your own place with new eyes.
Yeah.
Uh, I think we all have realized in a church like ours that you know, you don't have to be around too long before you don't see the cobwebs anymore. You don't see the cracks in the plaster anymore. So that was a very helpful tool, and in particular, being encouraged to, as you say, reach beyond ourselves and have some other community partners who would be willing and were willing to come in and walk through the facility with us.
And so because you found that so helpful, I might suggest that you do that no less than annually, but
Hmm.
get a new person to come and walk through and look with you. Pay
Hmm.
attention, especially to things like signage. If you're a brand new person walking in the building, how do you know where to go? One of the things I encourage, again, if you're looking to attract new people, and most of our churches
Hmm.
are,
Yeah.
um, have a floor plan available, right? So a newcomer on a Sunday knows where to find things. I'm particularly adamant about that. If you have children, you wish to have children come in with their parents. And, we're all very good at saying, okay, there's children's hour. You can all go with your teacher. And the parents are like, excuse me, where would that be? So that if you could have available in the back a floor plan and a map, here are the various rooms where and how to find your way to them.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just a couple of things, but no less than annually. Have somebody that has not been in the building before walk through it and give you that kind of feedback. What do they notice?
Hmm.
I like to ask nurses, to be honest. They don't miss much in terms of deferred maintenance.
Yeah. Thank you.
Michelle, how about you? What new insights or tools might you have gained?
Well, as a coach, the things that really were so impactful to me is to learn about the economic halo effect,
Hmm. Hmm. Isn't
and
that wonderful?
it's wonderful. And just being able to look at the potential uses of space in brand new ways.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Yes, it's interesting when you ask people who are interested in using the space to take a look at it and tell you what they see,
Mhm.
and to have them hear each other's programs and how can they work together. It's kind of a bigger approach to what I was talking about with whom around this table can we
Yes.
work to make everyone's dreams come true? Yeah, great. Thank you. Um, Carmen, how about
Yes.
you?
Um, Admittedly, this is the first session I've been able to attend in a while, and it's usually myself and my colleague, Reverend Troy Underwood. But what I can say is I think the importance of relationship and having other relationships outside of or having relationships, sort of accountability slash coaching relationships to help you grow, is just key in any area that in our ministries, period, whether it's the building um, or the programs or the events or whatever. That it's important to have the relationship building. And it's not just that you don't operate in the silos that you mentioned earlier, because you don't really then, you know, um, you're sort of building things with a if you build it, they will come mentality instead of the if you build it
Yeah.
with them, they will absolutely come kind of thinking.
They will care to come, right?
They will
Exactly.
care to
Yeah.
come, yes. So
Yeah.
that would
So,
probably be the key thing. So, mhm.
so when I ask the question, we call it cute. It's kind of a cute phrase, accountability buddies.
Mhm.
And when we're building that, we're building it around the with whom can you work question without using the word accountability,
Mhm.
which if anybody is shame inclined, that's going to push that button. So the kind of crazy like a fox um, employment of that with whom and who else really does. If you're working in tandem, you're gonna work with each other. There's going to be a certain amount of accountability just built in.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for being here.
Mhm.
Lyndon, you wrote your answer in the chat. Yes, I think I saw that. Okay. And I'm not sure who this looks like we have an AI presence, Laney, but okay. Is there a possibility that you can answer? No. Okay. Bridget, what you got?
Your timing is good because I just finished my lunch. I think um, for partners, it was a really interesting exercise because we're used to spending a lot more time with congregations and sort of, really being a bit more embedded and understanding their culture as we begin the work. And in this instance, it was harder because we didn't really ever get that opportunity. So how to find out what the particular need, sometimes it's a perceived need, and sometimes it's the actual need. So sometimes there's, it was really trying to figure out what is it that this congregation needs. And that's led to some very, very interesting conversations and I think opportunities. I think it was hard for partners because in some ways we do like to spend more time and working with clients and to really help them more deeply. But I think we were able to provide tools and resources and questions, I think, that were helpful. I mean, I've heard people mention the Halo or the asset mapping. I think working with the coaches has been very helpful too. I thought, it took a little while to evolve, but I think that was helpful. So how to how to get to the very specific question when the congregation may not really know for sure, and we might not really know for sure. Prove to be challenging at times, and sometimes we, sort of ignored the rules and met more often, or I might refer one of the congregations to another one of my colleagues because they fit the bill better.
Yeah.
So we had to do a little sort of sussing to make that happen. But
I actually think that's one of the things that you excel at partners is if there's somebody else who might fit the bill better, you're really good at referencing one another and you know each other well enough to know strengths.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
great. Really great. Um, oh, good. And if you have specific resources that you've found helpful, please follow Lyndon's lead and go ahead and add them in the chat. Um, so unless there are people who'd like to add another thing, if we move on to the second question, so you have a chance to really think these things through, and you think about the things that you have gotten this year and maybe gotten a taste of and want more of, and you think this is one of those places where I'm really going to encourage you to put the needs of the community with which you're working ahead of your own curiosity, right? So you may have an opinion about what you'd like individually, what's going to promote or support your program. What other tools or skills would you like to develop in the next year? Letitia, you want to go? Oops, I can't tell. She's raising her hand or getting off. Oh, you're gonna bye. Take care. Thank you for being here. Let's go in the opposite direction. Bridget, what other tools or things might you like to develop?
I think it's and as one of the things, and this is something Partners talks about all the time as we first enter into conversation with congregations, is kind of an assessment tool that would help us sort of zero in and get a sense of, where things are. Now, churches are living beings. They're not necessarily, factoids. So it may be a little challenging, but to really be able to discover what the capacity is, because sometimes it's the human capacity is limited or exhausted. Other times it's maybe the financial. There were congregations that we worked with that I just felt so bad for because the pastors were truly overwhelmed, and things were happening around them in their personal lives or in their ecclesial life that they couldn't necessarily control. It was just what was happening. So to maybe I would love to have some way to assess that more quickly, so that we can kind of get to what it is that the real need is, because sometimes it looks like one thing but it's really another.
Right. So Delaney, I had a moment with Bridget in the chat. I have 3 assessment tools, one that's kind of overarching, one that's used monthly, and one for a first meeting time that I'd be happy to work with you on tailoring for your use.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So offline we can set a time and I'll walk through those with you. And then, use them as they will serve you. From Dr. Carmen, what might you want to develop in the next year? Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
I just did our we have to do self-evaluations and annual evaluations. And so it's a similar question, and I am still actually pondering it. I think the challenge that I'm having is narrowing it down to one. I know that if I don't narrow it down to one, then I'll be all over the place. And so I'm still in discernment would probably be the fair response to your question.
Amen. So what I've learned to do is narrow it down to 5.
Yeah.
And then 3.
Right. And then 3.
Then 2. Then 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then really go for a long walk and pray. And what rises to the surface is the question I would ask, rather than what's more important, because that'll shut you right down. So walking along what rises to the surface of your heart and soul, and trust that you're being led. So I'll just lend that to you if it's helpful.
It's actually very helpful. I've learned to each day I do the way my planner is set up is that I do narrow it down to my big 3 for that day.
Yep.
Even. And sometimes when I'm stuck between which one should I do next, I do take a little walk, even if it's around the kitchen in my house. I'll take
Yep.
a walk and I'll say, okay, which one am I focusing on next? Because I know I could sit back down and still be all over the place. So I'll,
Yeah.
before I sit back down. So that is quite helpful. But I love and I love particularly the question, what rises to the top?
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot of pressure off. Back to Tom's earlier point. So walking around literally helps not only oxygenate your blood, but also literally changes perspective as you come back. So one of the things I said to the clergy that I work with during the pandemic is emotion needs motion,
Mm.
right? So that you can sort through it. And so does deep thought. Yeah, good for
Mhm.
you. Michelle, what would you like to develop in the coming year?
Well, one of the things that I was only able to do, I think, a couple of times was to arrange a Zoom meeting with different clients so that they could just learn from one another.
Mm,
And they found that so helpful because most of pastoral work is so siloed.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
it was one thing for me to share, but for them to be able to talk directly to each other and problem solve. That's something I think programmatically uh, could be developed more.
Yeah, so here's what I would suggest where I found it to work really well is to pre-plan quarterly meetings and ask people to make that a priority for themselves, and really for themselves and for one another and stress that. And what you're doing is building a team and building a place, a space where people can be brave. You know, one of the things we've learned is you can't really guarantee a safe space,
Yes,
right? Because you can't guarantee how other people are going to behave. What
right.
you can do is guarantee that you, as the facilitator or convener, are inviting people to be brave in this space to each other's benefit. And if you'll be honest about it, people engage more deeply. So, yay for you. And some of these questions will apply there
Yes.
to be, yep, right, to kind of calibrate and self-evaluate. So, great. Yay. Tom, how about you? What would you like to develop in the next year?
Well, I'm thinking about as we've taken this initial walking, looking at our assets and so forth, it's brought a lot of new ideas. I'm struck by your comment today about as you decide to pick something up, what do you lay down in order to enable that to happen? In general, our congregation here is great at attempting to pick things up, and eventually we've got full arms because we've never put anything down. So I'd like to definitely look at our ministries and how we use our time as well as our space and resources here with that thought of what uh, what has served its purpose and maybe now can be
Yeah,
de-emphasized or let down or referred to
Mhm.
someone else as we to give us the opportunity to see some of these new initiatives we've uncovered.
I actually work with a church in New York, Bridget Metro, that actually did
Mhm.
a self-study and a demographic study of the people that they were serving to ask themselves the questions, just because we've done these programs since the beginning of time, are they still meeting the needs of the current population of people, right? And what do we need to recalculate or recalibrate so that we are better meeting and more confident that we're meeting?
Hmm.
I will tell you, Tom, the first time I asked the chairs that I had convened um, in this church I was serving, the question about what will you put down, you could have cut the silence with a knife. I mean,
Mhm.
they were so bumfuzzled about that. And I did need to explain to them, energy is finite.
Hmm.
And if you begin to think about what it's going to take for you to be successful in this new venture, asking yourself to do that on top of all the other things you're doing and committed to doing is really unkind,
Mm-hmm.
and helping them to begin to really understand this is a self-care and success focus on behalf of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So hang in there with the question.
Yeah.
Don't let go of it.
Yeah, I will be directly asking that question, and they will be just, some of them will be just as flummoxed as your people were. Let something down. Some will be happily surprised. You mean we can do that?
There was I used to be a part of the Connecticut conference of the United Church of Christ, and when the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut were going to merge into one conference, one of the questions that was posed to us as conferences was putting it in the context of when the Israelites were crossing the Jordan, and they couldn't take everything with them. So, what did they put down? What did they leave on the shore? And then
That's
what
awesome.
take? And it's always stuck with me. And it's biblical. So, you could really relate to that sense.
And in the pandemic, when we moved everything online, the question many congregations had to ask themselves is, what is essential?
Right.
Right. And it drew the line between essential and traditional.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So to be able to ask what are our essential commitments at this point. What a great story. I'm hanging on to that, Bridget. Okay. So let's consider this third question. What new insight that you gained this year was most surprising to you, and why?
Hmm.
I love that. Michelle, you want to start?
I don't know if it was so much a new insight, but surprising about how deep it went. How many clergy are still feel so isolated,
Yeah.
and how many of the people I was coaching didn't really want so much help with church programming, but they needed a sounding board. They needed
Yes.
somebody to feel like they were walking beside them.
Yes. Yes. One thing you might want to give some thought to is, quite aside from the coaching, an opportunity for a more of a community of practice format, right? So that they actually can gather and resource each other around that. You have some choices to make about what the organizing principle is. And it would take some of the pressure off so you can actually do the work of bricks and mortals people when you gather with them. Just a thought. Just a thought. Tom, what was surprising?
I think it was probably based on the new eyes that we had, walk through our space and our ministry with us. We've always perceived ourselves, the congregation has always perceived itself to be a friendly church. But then we discovered sometimes our facility is not friendly in all cases, and sometimes even our ministries, while we think they're friendly, they're there's inaccessibility in both arenas. Inaccessibility in the facility and inaccessibility in terms of the ministry. So that was probably most surprising for us.
One of the things I do along with the map, right, the floor plan or footprint of the church, is I encourage, and it needs to be revised pretty regularly, is a list of all the ministries and who somebody can contact if they're interested, not the other way around, right? So this is not fresh chum in a piranha tank situation. This is somebody whose heart has led them to reach out and say, I'd like to be involved. That kind of contact information. Let's see, Lyndon, I'm guessing the writing. Bridget,
Hmm.
what do you think?
As I think about it, maybe it's not so surprising, but I watched it happen in real time, which was for the program itself, the S4 program itself. It when it started out, it was very different than how it evolved, and what it evolved into. So I remember that they used to have these like on-site trainings, and actually I was supposed to be at one, and then had to go to the emergency room with my mom, and I just remember
Mm,
the group really filled in for me, so I never actually went to one of those. But then how the leadership at S4 and Bricks and Mortals kind of moved away from that,
mm,
um, and just so it's the theoretical. It's like we have an idea. In theory, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to reach out. And then how in actuality, it was much more cumbersome and confusing. And then it kind of found its way. And,
mm,
you know, I said this at the New York gathering a couple of weeks ago. I really actually, when Delaney and Jessica joined the team, it just clarified a lot. The organization changed, and people knew more about what they were supposed to do, especially I think
mm,
partners end. So I think that was the learning, was just that you might have this really wonderful theoretical idea, but living into it can be
mhm.
clunky and confusing. But don't give up, right?
Right.
Just keep sort of evolving and
Yeah.
figuring out what is the missing pieces here that need to be put in.
I'd even highlight that a little bit and say, you may have a new wonderful idea and it will be clunky and confusing.
Yeah.
And having an opportunity to ask yourself these questions will help you learn sooner.
Yeah.
Delaney was going to say something. Go ahead, Delaney.
Yeah, that definitely made me think of my takeaway for this question, which is it's funny that you said that, Bridget, because I think I would describe myself, and also Jessica would describe herself as someone who likes, action steps, very organized, tangible items. And so I think the S4 program and my involvement has really forced me to think more theoretically and use that as a compass to ask these important questions. And, action and it being tangible and defined is really helpful at certain points in the process. But if we don't have these important conversations at the beginning, like our direction is so, it's just important to find and define our direction that we're going in. So
Mhm.
I thought that was funny that you said that.
I would say, Delaney, it's a both and. After every theoretical discussion, in the end, it's what is our next step,
Yeah.
and get people to answer that. So even if it's the next meeting or research or whatever, just that it's named. Because when you have the same conversation on a fairly regular basis about things you think you've already decided, this is where coaching comes in. It's because somebody hasn't asked the next step question, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, back to accountability buddies, answering that everyone around the table or everyone on the screen hears, and they know they're not only making a commitment to a group, but they know who they can count on to do certain things, and it's not all on them. I always say, beware the lone arranger.
Yes.
Somebody who thinks they can get off screen and go do it all. And that's a good way to set up adversarial relationships right there. So by everyone naming what a next step is going to be for them, that just takes care of that, like from the get-go. Carmen, how about you? What new insight was most surprising for you?
Um, I recently preached a sermon and it was about the blind man, and I talked about blind spots, being blindsided, and the blind leading the blind.
Mhm.
And I realized that one of my blind spots is not asking for help. And
Mm,
so I think that was kind of a surprising insight. Um, eh, well, let me go back a step. I probably started realizing that last year, that that was a blind spot for me to not ask for help. And so I think what was surprising is the responses that I got when I did simply ask for help. Um, for example, asking for some assistance with a holiday program that we do. Um, Last year it was me, my son, and my husband doing it. And this year there were 15 people in a room just going at it and doing something that you know, took me days at a time and lots of frustration. And so I guess that was the surprising thing. Now I know, I mean, of course I've known, but I've also always thought that you have to do something first by yourself because
No.
I wanted to do the things first by myself and then be able to know what I needed help with. Whereas I really could have just asked for help at the beginning and been like, okay, it's the blind leading the blind, but we're gonna figure this out together, kind of a thing. So I could have asked for help sooner, I guess, was probably the surprising thing, just in general in ministry, period, whether that's something related to the building, something related to um, a program, something related to a problem I'm having with a colleague or coworker or whatever it is, asking for help first, or sooner, definitely, rather than
Mm,
later. And then
mm,
I think the other thing is that, again, knowing, uh, having kind of knowing it, but haste really does make waste.
mm,
So by slowing down in many of the things that I've done, I've actually had more effective results instead of rushing through to do things. So those
mm.
are two surprising, or surprising doesn't really quite feel like the right word, but we'll just go with it for now.
Yeah,
Surprising.
well, they're awakenings.
Awakenings,
Our
right,
awarenesses, right? New
right,
awarenesses.
right. So,
Um, do you, can I give you just some thoughts to keep in mind about the whatever this annual thing is?
mhm,
One of the things I learned is, and this is for everyone, right? This first thing is for everyone. Churches are woefully, or new programs are woefully inadequate around um, succession planning, right? So when I go into churches and they don't even have a nominating committee, I freak out very quietly inside. They don't see it, but I'm like, and or they say to me, "Oh yes, they meet 2 months before our annual meeting." That's the other. I'm going to tear my hair out right now.
mhm,
When you are paying attention to cultivating leadership, you do so based on observation and relationship. And keeping in mind that there's a difference between a passion and a strength, and making sure that you do direct outreach and request based on strength. That's the first part. The second part is beware success. So these have to be people who are mature enough to allow others to also help them, and that their worth is not based on a proprietary interest in that segment of whatever they're doing, right? So what I listen for is, this is the way we do this. And I've got warning bells are going off like Danger Will Robinson right there. So to be able to bring into your systems a kind of a climate and a culture of acceptance and in understanding. And I'll do this with churches. I walked in the building. I've heard all of you say you really want to grow, you want to be open, you want to be welcoming of new people on the one hand, and on the other hand, you don't want to change. And
Right.
they laugh, and I say, "This is what I have heard you say. We're going to have to work on that if you really do want to grow and change." Because how many of you like to be welcomed into a new organization and be told, "This is the way we do things," which is code for your new idea is not welcome, right? Which is the last thing probably that you'd want them to hear.
Mm.
So this is why I said in the very beginning, powerful questions are short, deceptively simple, and artfully crafted, right? Meaning paying attention to the language of the other individual, the culture, the lenses that they may have, just being really careful about that. So when you're thinking about these gatherings and the reflective questions, and even the questions that you ask yourself, here's another couple of good ones. What have you consistently told yourself is not possible? And why? Right? One of them, when people say, we tried that once, I said, how many years ago? Oh, 25. Okay. What was different then? So you're asking questions that open up possibilities. And typically, if you can ask that question, what is the thing you've been telling yourself consistently won't work? And they answer it in a group, you've got at least one person in the group that, so why wouldn't that work? And suddenly the doors have opened. There. So short, deceptively simple, artfully crafted, always aimed towards possibility. So learning how to ask a question that is solution focused and leaving the qualifier out. No qualifiers. Does that make sense? You understand what I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So if we can keep going, the fourth question, what work or project are you most proud of doing in this last year? Carmen, can you start on that one? Oh, you're muted. Hang on.
What work or projects am I most proud of?
Proud of. Yeah, in this last year.
Um, yes. This is completely program related. I implemented a Being Well Day of Retreat for the women of our church. And it was a new initiative. It had over 125 women there. And we did yoga together. We did chair exercises. We knitted, or crocheted, I'm sorry. I learned the difference. We line danced. Um, and we had a speaker and everything, but it was just about a 6-hour event. We shared food together. So that work was something that I was most proud of. And I wrote a curriculum. There we go.
That's beautiful.
So
I keep hearing rest is resistance, right? In the background.
Oh,
Full
yes.
nap ministry.
Oh,
Yay
yes.
for you.
Absolutely. My book that I reread this year was The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And then I recently just stumbled across the 6 working geniuses, which has been very
Yes.
helpful. The 6
Yes.
working types or working genius types or something like that. But yes, I reread The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry again this year. So, and I
So I'm going to
practice
put a bug
Sabbath
in.
regularly. So yes.
No, you go ahead. Okay.
Oh no, I said I've been really much better at practicing a Sabbath and slowing down and knowing that rest is resistance, et cetera, et cetera. So yes.
So Lencioni's 6 working geniuses
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the best investments of $25 per person I have made in facilitating my team, in knowing how to talk with each other, what they can ask of each other, what's each other's sweet spot. If we had any gaps, which is really important to know. So one of the things I would encourage you all to do is if you aren't aware of that work, take a look at it and ask yourself how, not if, how will it benefit us to take a look at this as a working group. We actually have done whole strategic reorganizations around that work.
Yeah,
It's that powerful. Yeah.
I'm going to share it with when I have my evaluation with our senior pastor. That is included in my list of things that I want to share with him, because I do think it will be helpful for us to bring that work into
Huge.
our team. So yeah.
Yes, huge. Yay. Well, see now y'all, and this is another thing I was thinking as you were talking. When you brought up the ruthless elimination of hurry, I'm like, that totally went down on my page. And, being able to have regular sharing of resources. Delaney's on our newsletter now. We update resources every 3 months around various categories. And being resources for each other around, hey, I read this book. Hey, this was great. Um, if you're not on our newsletter, you may want to be. I wrote, to your point, actually, wrote a piece this month on the unthought known. That what coaching is meant to do is to call forth the unthought known. So some things to think about yourself. Bridget, new worker, the worker project you're most proud of this year.
Well, it's so weird because it's not exactly a like a hooray kind of project, but it was an S4 congregation that when I initially met with them, they were very interested in kind of growing the congregation, that was going to be sort of their focus, and any space work that they were thinking about was all about that. And I sort of shifted that's focus. And then as we continued, this was another one of those ones where we tried this and we tried that. Ultimately, it was asking the question, if you did nothing, how long a runway do you have? And they discovered that it was second quarter 2025, and they were going to run out of money. And so that was quite startling for them, for us, and really then how to shift gears in a way. And it still took a long time for us to kind of really find the right location. I hope that we have sort of geared them towards the right resource, because they will need it. But it was just that that discovery with at least a little time for them to sort out what their legacy is going to be, what their path is going to be, what are they going to do, which is still a big question, but that enlightenment was pretty powerful.
Yeah, encouraging people to never, ever stop asking the question of themselves, what am I called to do and be under God in a needy world?
Yeah.
Right. That is the always question. What am I called to do and be under God in a needy world? Because no matter how little we have to give, the world needs it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Michelle, how about you? What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of one of the congregations I was working with was doing an excellent job in using their space, connecting to the community, having thriving programs. But the church congregation was on one side, and then the community partners were on the other side. And I worked with that pastor to come up with rituals and programs to bring those two entities together so that they weren't kind of looking at each other like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And it was very successful. It was very successful. So that was the thing I was most proud of, that I was able to help them kind of come together as one community.
When I train coaches around that kind of work, I train them to do something I call creating a same page. And particularly when there's an adversarial atmosphere, it's usually around values, not around the specific. And it sounds like you were able to do that. So feather in your cap.
Thank you.
Yeah. 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 Tom, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, I think it's, as a result of our looking at our facility and how can we add value to our community, we came into a partnership with a organization in our area called Casa San Jose. And as a result of that partnership, now in the middle of the week, we have about 150 people coming, some of our friends and neighbors, Spanish speakers, who come here for English as a second language classes, and that are facilitated by volunteers in our church. So, we now, a building that once, particularly during the pandemic times, was totally dark. on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night is now alive with vibrancy and action. And we're looking at ways to even further that partnership through Spanish speaking ministries in our church. As right now we're hosting this and participating in this wonderful work that's being done and facilitated by a partner ministry, but we're looking to see how we can build on that.
So nesting them in your organization, that kind of thing. Great.
Yes.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And looking at they come here for language learning, but looking at the spiritual side of it for those who would be interested in doing that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So many initiatives that can be done. Parents' night out, all those things. I have we have looked at the formal questions that Delaney had listed for you. I have one for you, and I'm going to ask it, and I'm going to give you a moment. Mine is, what have you learned about yourself through this work? And the final one is, what is your biggest takeaway from this work? I'd like to start with, what have you learned about yourself?
This is Carmen. I'll speak
Yeah.
while I have a moment. I'm going to have to tune off in just a moment. I've learned about myself that I often tend to do more things that I'm competent at and not as many things that I'm passionate about. So I'd like to reverse that because I'm pretty competent at quite a bit. And if I use the 6 working genius types, I'd like to be in my working competencies and my working joys and not my working frustrations more.
Yeah. One thing to take a look at, Carmen, for you on a weekly basis would be a question: what has fed my soul this week? Right? And then look ahead to finding time to address that question kind of ahead. What can I set aside time to feed my soul with next week? Karen, yeah, Karen Wallerand, in her book, The Light Maker's Manifesto, does an absolutely brilliant job of helping with journaling questions and attitudes around, she calls it learning joy in an activist life, right? And I just absolutely massacred the way she actually says it, but you get the feel for it. So to be able to ask, what have I done this week that has fed my soul, may help you keep that kind of on the forefront. Because you may have to go, what's your takeaway from this year's work?
I guess it's the same, really. Take away,
Awesome.
Take away what you're passionate about more often than just the competent or the frustration. So try to kind of create a better balance. So
wonderful. My goodness. Amen and amen. Tom, learned about yourself?
Yeah, I'd say biggest learning, I guess you could say just in time after 37 years of full-time ministry, I've finally maybe I've always sensed it before, but I finally now believe that ultimately success or failure is not entirely up to me. The entire burden is not upon my shoulders, and sometimes one simply talk about putting things down. You have to put that expectation down in order to reach out and invite the participation of others, like I've experienced here, and will hopefully continue to carry on as I hopefully, with the team, reach out to the entire congregation and invite them. I was challenged today by your words to think about who's not around the table, whose gifts are we missing. Uh, this could definitely further my progress along those same lines.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear that. Takeaway? Is that that's the takeaway part of
Yeah,
that?
I guess that would be the takeaway part. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That big question, who's not currently around the table, who might uh, join with us. I'm a big naturally. I have a tendency to be that person. I wrote down your quote. What did you?
The Lone Ranger.
The lone arranger.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to being the lone arranger. I maybe that's my takeaway from today. I'll mull that over and think about that concerning myself.
Yeah. Beware the Lone Ranger. There you go.
Yeah.
Inside and out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like the question, who is not around the table, functions in two ways for you. One is who am I? Who with whom can I work
Yeah. Yeah.
to, right, to share the wealth?
Hmm.
And the other is more around impact,
Yeah.
right? Understanding that there is always a difference between intent and impact.
Hmm.
Who will, as well intended as our decision is, who will it impact and how can we include them in the
Hmm.
decision making?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Michelle, takeaway? Oh no, self first. What have you learned about yourself?
What I learned about myself was when talking to uh, uh, pastors that were doing really innovative things. What I learned about myself was how disillusioned I have become about the church, and talking to them
Mm,
how life-giving that was for me. It excited something in me I didn't know needed to be excited, if that makes
wonderful.
sense.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that how much I really enjoyed uh, being a support to pastors.
Mm, mm,
That really was something that resonates deep within me, because I understand the isolation and the frustration.
Yeah.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. And your takeaway?
I guess that's it. that
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think the takeaway is broadly how much this work is needed.
Yeah.
Oh, amen. Yes.
Right? We just think that people are able to navigate and make their way all by themselves, and the
Mm,
need for community and the need for kind of structured helping is very real.
yeah. What I tell people um, is, there are two creation stories in Genesis,
Mhm.
and the oldest one is the creating of both beings on the riverbank. We know that by dating it. And what I say is, we were created in community.
Mhm.
We were never intended to do life alone, right? And um, for anyone who feels like asking someone else for support or help is somehow a character flaw, somehow telling that story and really setting it in that context relieves that burden from people. So I'll just offer you that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Bridget,
You
how
know,
about you?
it just reminds me, since this has been such a topic, of the book Reinforcements by Heidi Grant. It's basically how
Hmm.
to ask for help. Literally how to ask for help, not like the like sad puppy way. Um,
Yeah.
and but I would say for my own learning was really I am someone who needs clarity in order to move forward. And I
Hmm.
try to give that to other people, but it's not always easy to do. So this was very really really great. But that sense of how to move forward, you can't move forward unless you're clear about that, at least that next step, and how to navigate that. And I think that's what this work has been about. And then my takeaway is really right. Having served churches for 20 years, the courage of pastors, especially now, not like 20 years ago, like when I started, or 25 years ago when I started. It's really now, because what we saw coming
Mm,
in. It used to be you had one foot in the traditional world and one foot in the new world, and now it's like your whole hog, this new unknown that's unfolding. And I like to say it's like a Reformation without a Martin Luther. It's like I don't know who's leading this thing.
yeah.
It's almost the culture itself. So I really am more amazed than ever by those pastors who choose to stay in
Amen.
the work of pastoring, because it's harder than ever.
Hmm. Hmm. And you really touched on something there. Part of what enables pastors to stay is understanding that they have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a choice, and it's a choice that you can make every day,
Yep.
right? And your ability to continue to choose it really does depend upon your ability to take care of yourself and walk humbly with your God,
Yep.
right? So, so yeah, amen. And take away from this work,
That was it, the courage.
that's your take. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And what about it, learning about, the clarity, learning about
Clarity, so
yourself?
you can move
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I want to say what a pleasure it's been to work with you on and off this year. Um, our work around communications and conflict and, um, some of the other topics that Delaney has been so kind as to allow us to journey in and through and with you. And as you close the year, I hope you do have an opportunity to um, kind of reflect back and really, really do count for the successes. And actually, this would be a really good thing to do with your groups as well. What are these same questions? What are the things you're most proud of? What would you, and then as you go into next year, I pray there is a richness of learnings for you and accomplishments. And more than that, the time to recognize them,
Mm-hmm.
the time to recognize them. So I thank you.
Thank
I think
you.
that's it, Delaney, for me. If you have more you'd like to cover, do so.
Yes, super quickly. I have an exit poll that I'd like to give. Okay. Is it showing up on everyone's screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. It's fantastic always. And these seminars have been such a light, and I'm sad that they're ending, but also excited that we have all these resources for cohorts to just like look back on and rediscover old questions and new questions and things like that. Yeah.
And a number of you, different people, different times, have asked to be on our newsletter. If you do want that, and to continue to be able to gather some resources and kind of self-care prompts and stuff, just let Delaney know, and she'll give me your email address. Or you
Yes.
can reach me. I'll put our email or my email in the chat. There you go.
Thanks for coming, Michelle.
I was going to say thank you. It wouldn't have been the same without you. And that's the truth.
Thank you, everyone. It was really, really wonderful to see you and have this experience with you.
Thanks.
Amen.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tom. Have a good day.
Thanks. Take care.
Awesome. I can stop recording now.